My name is Eliana, and for the past 2 years, I've worked as a maid in the home of one of the richest families in New York, the Devereaux family. Every morning I'd be up at 5 a.m. sweeping floors that gleamed like mirrors and dusting furniture worth more than I'd make in 3 years. I wore the same faded blue uniform, kept my hair tied back, and walked with my head down. That was the rule. Don't make eye contact with the guests, the head butler would whisper. You're the help. Be invisible. It wasn't always like this. I had dreams once. I wanted to be a teacher. But life had other plans that involved student debt, a sick mother, and a little sister who looked up to me with big hopeful eyes. Cleaning toilets in a billionaire's house wasn't glamorous, but it paid. Madeleine Devereaux, the billionaire's daughter, was a woman who could make a room freeze with a glance. Beautiful, poised, and terrifying. She was used to getting everything she wanted. And what she wanted most, it seemed, was to remind people of their place, especially mine. I still remember the way she looked at me the day she handed me the invitation. She didn't say a word. Just smiled. A cruel, tight-lipped smile. Then she placed the envelope on the silver tray I was holding as if it were garbage. Wear something appropriate, she said finally. Wouldn't want to embarrass yourself. I should have known better. No one invited the maid to a billionaire's birthday party unless there was a punchline. But I went. Because something deep inside me said this time things were about to change. I held the invitation in my hands for hours that night. The envelope was cream-colored, thick and expensive, with the Devereaux family crest embossed in gold. The handwriting was neat, precise, definitely not Madeleine's. Probably one of the assistants. But it bore her signature at the bottom, just enough to send a chill through my spine. Formal attire required, it said. I didn't own a formal dress. I barely owned clothes that weren't work uniforms. My money went to rent, my mother's medication, and groceries. There wasn't anything left for ball gowns and heels. I sat on the edge of my bed in the tiny room behind the laundry quarters, staring at my reflection in the cracked mirror. My face looked tired. Hollow. My hands were red and cracked from bleach and scrubbing. But my eyes still held a spark. Maybe it's time, I whispered. Time to stop hiding in the shadows. Time to remind myself I was more than just a uniform. More than just a maid. The next day I skipped lunch to make a phone call. Then another. And another. By nightfall I had found someone who owed me a favor, an old friend from school who had once been homeless and stayed with us for 2 weeks when no one else would take him in. I'll get you a dress, he said. Don't worry about it. The day of the party arrived faster than I expected. The mansion was buzzing with activity. Florists rushed in with cascading bouquets, chefs barked orders, and an entire team of decorators transformed the ballroom into a shimmering ocean of blue and gold. Guests were flying in from Paris, Dubai, London. It was the biggest party of the year. I was still working that morning, dusting the third-floor study when I overheard them. Madeleine and her 2 friends, lounging on velvet chairs, sipping champagne, laughing like the world was theirs. She's actually coming, one of them said, barely containing her smirk. Can you imagine? She'll probably show up in her cleaning uniform, Madeleine sneered. It's going to be hilarious. They all burst into laughter. Something in my chest twisted, but it didn't break. I smiled quietly to myself. They had no idea. That evening I stood outside the front gates, a full hour before the party started. My friend had delivered. The dress was breathtaking, deep emerald green, hugging my figure in all the right places, with delicate off-shoulder sleeves and a subtle shimmer that made my skin glow. He'd even found a makeup artist willing to do my face for free, and when I looked in the mirror, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. Elegant, strong, unapologetic. As I walked through the marble entrance, all eyes turned to me. The room fell quiet. It wasn't part of Madeleine's plan. And what happened next? It definitely wasn't. Silence. It wrapped around the ballroom like a velvet curtain the moment I stepped in. Hundreds of guests filled the space. Socialites in designer gowns, billionaires in tailored tuxedos, influencers live streaming for clout. Laughter had echoed through the air just seconds ago. But now every pair of eyes was on me. I stood tall at the top of the marble staircase, clutching a small emerald clutch in one hand, my heels clicking gently as I began my descent. Madeleine stood near the champagne fountain, frozen mid-sip. Her face said it all, shock, confusion, and a flicker of something darker. She didn't expect this. She expected a joke. A punchline. A maid in rags who'd give everyone something to laugh about. What she got was a woman transformed. At the base of the staircase I paused, suddenly aware of just how quiet the room had gotten. And then, it happened. A slow clap. From the back of the room. Then another. And another. Within seconds the room erupted into applause. Not mocking. Not sarcastic. Real, thunderous applause. The kind you hear after a standing ovation. The kind you give to someone who's survived something. Someone who's risen. I stood there stunned. Why were they clapping? Why no? And then I saw him, Mr. Alaric Devereux himself. The billionaire. Madeline's father. He rose from his seat, walked to the center of the ballroom, and nodded toward me with the kind of quiet respect that silences even the loudest gossip. Eliana, he said. It's an honor. I hadn't seen Mr. Devereux in months. The man was always traveling. Business in Shanghai, meetings in Geneva, yachts in Monaco. But when he was home he kept to himself. He never spoke to the staff unless absolutely necessary. Which is why I couldn't understand what was happening. Why was he calling attention to me? Why was the room following his lead? And then it all came back. 3 months ago I'd found something. It was a late night. Most of the staff had gone home. I was asked to clean the upstairs study, a rare request. That room was usually off limits. While dusting behind one of the antique bookshelves I'd knocked over a file. Papers scattered everywhere. Investment reports, personal letters, and a folder marked confidential. Curiosity got the better of me. Inside that folder were documents proving something shocking. Massive fraud in one of Mr. Devereux's companies. Someone was embezzling funds. Millions. I didn't know what to do. But I couldn't keep it to myself. So I left an anonymous note in his mailbox, along with copies of the files. He must have found out it was me. Because the person responsible was Madeline's fiancé. The applause still rang in my ears when Mr. Devereux crossed the room to greet me. His tailored black suit contrasted sharply with the glow of the chandeliers, but it was his expression, gentle, curious, firm, that gripped everyone. Eliana, he said again loud enough for the room to hear. Thank you, for your integrity. The murmurs began. People looked at each other. Integrity? Madeline's face turned a deeper shade of red. She clutched her champagne glass like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She's the one, Mr. Devereux continued, now addressing the entire room. The one who brought the embezzlement to light. Quietly. Without asking for a reward. Without even revealing her name. A gasp rippled through the guests. You see, he said, I was planning to announce the cancellation of my daughter's engagement tonight. What I wasn't planning on was having the woman who made it all possible walk through those doors looking like a queen. I froze. He knew. All this time he knew it was me. And he didn't just keep it secret. He chose this night, her night, to make it public. I owe you more than I can say, he added. People started whispering. Some nodded. Some smiled. Others turned their gazes sharply to Madeline, who was now visibly shaken. She invited you to mock you, didn't she? He said, more to me than to the crowd. But what she didn't know was that the person she tried to humiliate was the one who protected this family from ruin. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth was out. And it was louder than anything I could say. Madeline tried to regain control. This is insane, she snapped. You're seriously praising the maid right now? She's not just the maid, her father said, his voice suddenly sharp. She's the reason you're not facing a public scandal. She had the loyalty to protect this family when your own fiancé tried to destroy it. That's not. And the decency, he interrupted, not to expose you for the condescending, careless, manipulative mess you've become. The room turned into a silence so heavy, you could hear Madeline's breathing. Her father wasn't just angry, he was disappointed. The kind that cuts deeper than yelling. This is my birthday, she whispered, trembling. You're ruining my birthday. No, he said quietly. You ruined it. She just walked in and reminded me what dignity looks like. I should have felt satisfied. But I didn't. Because I knew Madeline wasn't just cruel. She was broken in ways most people couldn't see. The pressure of being a billionaire's daughter. The expectations. The isolation. None of it excused her behavior, but it explained why she clung to control like it was the only thing she had left. Still, it wasn't my job to fix her. I just needed to protect myself. And now maybe I could start something new. After Mr. Devereaux's declaration, the atmosphere in the ballroom shifted. The same guests who once whispered behind their champagne glasses now came forward with warm smiles, extended hands and even small bows. I wasn't just seen, I was acknowledged. "Miss Eliana, right?" said a woman in a satin green dress. "What you did, that was brave. I heard you uncovered it quietly." "That's incredible," said a man from a tech firm, shaking his head in admiration. "She walked in here like Cinderella and flipped the whole script," someone muttered, clearly impressed. Madeline, meanwhile, had vanished. I caught a glimpse of her, pushing past a group near the back, her face stormy, her posture stiff. For the first time in years, she was invisible in a room that was meant to be hers. Me. I had never felt more seen. Later that night, I stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the garden, needing air. The weight of everything, exposure, applause, transformation, was too much to process in the noise of the party. I was still in awe of how fast everything had changed. "You handled that well," came a voice behind me. I turned. It was Alaric Devereaux. "I owe you," he said simply. "Not just for the documents, for protecting the Devereaux name when you had every reason not to." I stayed quiet. "You could have gone to the press, sold the story. Instead, you cleaned up our mess in silence." "I didn't do it for you," I said honestly. "I did it because it was wrong, and someone needed to do what was right." He nodded slowly as if letting those words settle. "I'd like to offer you a new position," he said. "Not as a maid, as head of internal ethics for my foundation. You'll oversee grants, background checks, conflict resolutions. It pays well. It's respectable." I blinked. "Me? You're offering me that? You've already proven you have more integrity than most people in this room." I looked out over the city skyline. I thought about my mom still recovering and my sister who dreamed of college. "I'll do it," I said softly. I didn't go back to the maid's quarters that night. Instead, I packed my things quietly, walked through the staff corridor one last time, and left a note for Mrs. Helen, the head housekeeper who'd always been kind to me. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did," it said. I moved into a small apartment a week later, paid for upfront by the foundation. My new office was nothing fancy, but it had a window and a desk and my name on the door. Eliana Rose, Director of Internal Ethics. I used my full name for the first time in years. Madeline. She disappeared from the social scene for months. Rumor had it her father cut her off financially. He didn't disown her, but he asked her to find herself outside the glittering safety of their world. I saw her once at a gallery opening. She nodded at me from across the room. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. The following morning, I awoke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the blinds of my new apartment. The scent of freshly brewed coffee wafted from the kitchen, a comforting aroma that signaled the start of a new day. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the whirlwind of events that had led me here. My phone buzzed with messages of congratulations and job offers, but one stood out. A message from the Devereaux Foundation confirming my appointment as Director of Internal Ethics. It was a role that came with immense responsibility, but also the opportunity to make a meaningful impact. Later that day, I visited my mother and sister, sharing the news of my new position and the changes in our lives. Tears of joy filled my mother's eyes, and my sister hugged me tightly, her dreams of college now within reach. As I settled into my new role, I was determined to uphold the principles that had guided me thus far: integrity, compassion, and the courage to do what was right. The journey ahead would not be easy, but I was ready to face it head-on, embracing the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. My first month at the Devereaux Foundation was anything but easy. Though I now had a title and an office, not everyone was quick to welcome the maid-turned-director. A few board members gave me tight-lipped smiles and side eyes during meetings. Others tried to test me, slipping incomplete reports onto my desk, ignoring my requests, subtly undermining my decisions. I expected it. Power, especially earned without their permission, made some people deeply uncomfortable. But I didn't flinch. I reviewed every file myself. I caught errors in budget reports that had gone unnoticed for years. I flagged a conflict of interest involving a grant application linked to a friend of one of the board. When he tried to intimidate me in the hallway, I looked him in the eye and said, "The truth doesn't care how expensive your watch is." After that, people stopped testing me. They started respecting me. One Tuesday morning, the front page of the New York Ledger featured a full-spread article. Maid exposes multimillion-dollar fraud. Now heads Billionaire's ethics department. My phone exploded with calls. My name trended on social media for days. Even news outlets from Europe reached out for interviews. I wasn't just a maid who got lucky. I was a woman who uncovered corruption and rose because of it. But I didn't do any interviews. Instead, I sat down with a team of young girls from a nonprofit the foundation supported and shared my story privately. I told them the truth, that I'd once cleaned houses, that I once cried because I couldn't afford a dress, and that doing the right thing was what changed my life, not a miracle. One of the girls whispered, "I want to be like you." I smiled. "Be better," I told her. "Be stronger. Be braver. And never let anyone tell you your place is beneath their feet." One late afternoon, just as I was wrapping up reports in my office, I heard a soft knock on the door. It opened slowly. And in walked Madeline. She was different. No designer bag, no heels, no entourage. She wore jeans and a simple cream blouse. Her hair was tied back and her expression, soft, unsure, was nothing like the proud, sharp gaze I had once known. "Hi," she said almost too quietly. I stood, unsure what to expect. "I heard about what you've done," she added. "About the foundation. The girls you're mentoring. The reforms." I didn't say anything. I let the silence stretch. "I was awful to you," she said finally, her voice cracking. "I invited you to that party to humiliate you. I wanted to feel powerful, because I didn't know who I was without it." She paused, eyes glassy. "I was angry. At my dad. At my fiancé. At the world. But I had no right to take it out on you. So I stayed silent." "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she said. "I just wanted you to know. As you did. What I didn't." A long pause. Then I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit," I said softly. Her eyes widened. I didn't do it for her. I did it for me. Because growth doesn't come from revenge. It comes from rising above it. Over the next few weeks, I heard more stories from staff I used to work beside. Janitors, cleaners, drivers, people who had spent years in silence, never feeling safe enough to report corruption, harassment, or mismanagement within the foundation. But now they were speaking up. Because now there was someone like them on the inside. Someone who understood what it meant to be unseen. We created an anonymous reporting platform. We restructured internal review policies. I held monthly listening sessions with the staff. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. And little by little, the foundation changed. It started to look like a place where people weren't judged by their clothes or their backgrounds, but by their choices. As life began to settle into a new rhythm, something unexpected entered the picture. It started quietly, no grand gestures, no fairy tale drama. Just warm conversations over coffee and shared glances across boardroom tables. His name was Julian Marks. He was the head of the legal department, calm and insightful, with a kind of presence that made chaos seem manageable. He wasn't impressed by headlines or status. He was impressed by integrity. One day, after a long meeting about a corruption case, he walked me to the elevator and asked, "Do you ever take a break?" I laughed. "Does sleep count?" "How about dinner?" he said. No suits, no foundation talk. Just two people trying to find something real. And just like that, a new chapter began. 6 months later, I stood at the center of the Devereux Foundation's annual gala. Not as a maid, not as a guest, but as the keynote speaker. This time, I wore a navy blue gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. My name was printed in bold on the program. Eliana Rose, Director of Internal Ethics. As I stepped up to the podium, the room quieted, just like it had the night Madeline tried to humiliate me. Only this time, no one waited for me to fail. They waited to listen. "I was once a maid in this very mansion," I began, my voice steady. "And I used to believe my voice didn't matter. But I learned something important. The truth doesn't care who speaks it. It only asks that someone does." There was silence. Then applause. Then a standing ovation. And in the crowd, I saw my mother and sister beaming. I saw Julian with pride in his eyes. I even saw Madeline clapping softly with tears in hers. After the gala, the story of my journey spread far beyond New York. Emails poured in from women across the globe, maids, secretaries, single mothers, factory workers, telling me how my story gave them hope. How they felt seen for the first time. Some wanted advice. Some just wanted to say thank you. And others? They wanted change. That's when the idea came. With Mr. Devereaux's backing and my growing network, I launched the Rising Voices Initiative, a mentorship and advocacy program for underpaid, overlooked workers in corporate and domestic environments. We created a safe space for education, legal support, and job placement services. We even established scholarships. I named the first scholarship after my mother, the Rose Grant for Women of Resilience. A few months after the gala, Madeline reached out again, not for sympathy but for guidance. "I've been volunteering," she said, "at a women's shelter in Brooklyn. It's humbling." I listened without judgment. She told me about the first time someone mistook her for a staffer and how she had to learn to clean bathrooms for the first time in her life. "It's like I'm finally waking up," she admitted. "I want to do something that matters, but not because my last name opens doors. I want to earn it." For the first time I saw her without the shield of privilege. She wasn't healed, but she was trying. I recommended she apply for a training program through Rising Voices. I made no special exceptions. Weeks later she called breathless. I got in. And for once, Madeline Devereaux had done something on her own. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when I found myself walking through the old staff corridor at the Devereaux estate. A meeting had brought me there, but curiosity pulled me back to the small maid's room I had once called home. The door was locked now. No one stayed there anymore. But I stood in front of it for a while, remembering the girl I used to be. The girl who scrubbed floors while dreaming of change. The girl who walked into a party meant to break her spirit, and walked out with the world watching. It didn't feel like revenge anymore. It felt like closure. On the anniversary of the gala, we held the first Rising Voices Summit, hosting hundreds of women from across the country, each one a story of perseverance. I opened the event with a message I had carried since the beginning. Never let anyone shame you for where you start, because who you become is entirely your decision. After the panel discussions, I wandered the hall and overheard conversations that reminded me of my first days. Uncertainty, hope, ambition. I passed by a girl who looked no older than 19, nervously clutching a notepad. She stopped me, eyes wide. "You're Eliana Rose," she said. I nodded. "You changed everything for people like me." I reached for her hand gently. "No," I said. "You will change everything. I'm just here to remind you that you can." The Rising Voices Summit became more than just an event. It sparked a national movement. Stories poured in, of hotel maids confronting abusive managers, of janitors forming unions, of young women quitting toxic jobs to pursue college, entrepreneurship, or activism. Every story was a spark, lighting up dark corners that had gone ignored for too long. And every time I stepped onto a stage or into a meeting, I reminded people, this all started because one maid said enough. It wasn't about me anymore. It was about the power of what happens when even the quietest voice refuses to stay silent. Late one evening, Julian and I sat on the couch of our modest but peaceful home, surrounded by candlelight and laughter from a silly movie we half-watched. He reached for my hand and smiled softly. "You ever think about how wild this all is?" "All the time," I chuckled. He grew quiet for a moment, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Eliana," he said, eyes never leaving mine. "I fell in love with the way you fought, quietly, fiercely, and without apology. I want to build a future where we keep rising, together. Will you marry me?" I gasped. Not because I didn't expect it, but because for once, I felt worthy of something beautiful. "Yes," I whispered, tears in my eyes. 1,000 times yes. Julian and I didn't want a lavish wedding. We didn't need marble halls or gold-plated invitations. We chose something small, honest, and real. We married in a community garden, surrounded by sunflowers, rescued cats, street musicians, and the women from Rising Voices who had walked their own impossible paths to freedom. My mother wore her favorite blue scarf, and my sister gave a toast that left everyone in tears. I wore a dress handmade by one of the girls in our foundation. It wasn't expensive, but it was stitched with love, and that made it priceless. As we exchanged vows under a sky streaked with orange and pink, I realized I wasn't just walking into a new life. I was walking into healing. A few weeks after the wedding, a letter arrived at our office. It was handwritten. No return address. Inside was a single page. "To Eliana. You don't know me, but I watched what you did. I was one of the maids at another estate, not far from where you once worked. I was afraid to speak up. But after seeing you rise, I reported a long-standing abuse case, and now they're investigating. I still don't have much, but I have my voice. Thank you for teaching me how to use it. With love, someone you saved without knowing it. I folded the letter slowly, letting the weight of it press into my chest. That was the moment I knew I'd never be just a maid or even just a director. I had become a mirror, a torch, a door someone else could walk through. Months later, I was nominated for the National Human Dignity Award. I didn't expect to win. The list of finalists included senators, authors, and global activists, people with decades of work and millions of followers. But when the host read my name that night, the entire room stood, just like they had the night of the birthday party. Only this time it wasn't about shocking anyone. It was about honoring the quiet revolution born from a single act of courage. As I walked to the podium, I saw Julian beaming from the front row, my mother crying beside him. My sister held up her phone, whispering she did it, to anyone who'd listen. I looked out at the crowd, took a breath, and said, I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be invisible. But invisibility is a lie the world tells people it fears. People like maids, migrants, survivors, women. Tonight I accept this not for me but for every girl who scrubs hotel floors and dreams of being seen. You are not small. You are not powerless. You are not the joke at someone else's party. You are the story. And no one can silence that. The Rising Voices initiative went global. We expanded into 10 countries, launching centers for training, education, and justice. We offered language classes, legal aid, mental health support, and career guidance. More importantly, we built something that had been missing for generations: dignity. In a world obsessed with glamour and status, we made space for stories that mattered. Stories from kitchens, janitor closets, laundromats, refugee shelters, and orphanages. People no longer asked, why would a maid deserve a seat at the table? They asked, how did we ever forget she built it? A year after the award ceremony, I received an invitation. Embossed, gold-lettered, elegant. It was from the Devereaux family. This time it wasn't a setup. It was Mr. Alaric Devereaux's retirement gala. And he wanted me to give the farewell speech. It felt surreal walking back into the same grand ballroom where everything had started. But this time I wasn't stepping in through the service door. I walked through the front, hand in hand with Julian, greeted by a standing ovation. Even the chandeliers seemed to shine differently. Madeline was there too, now working as a director of a small community initiative for young women. She approached me quietly before the event began. I used to think power came from being feared, she said. But watching you, I learned power comes from being trusted. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest. And sometimes that's enough. As I took the stage, I looked around the ballroom one more time. Not just at the faces but at the journey. The staircase where I once descended in borrowed heels. The exact spot Madeline tried to shame me. The moment everything shifted. I want to thank Mr. Devereaux, I began. Not just for trusting me with a new role, but for creating a moment that changed the trajectory of my life. I let the crowd settle before continuing. A moment that began with an invitation meant to humiliate me, but ended with a room full of people standing, not because I was rich or famous or important, but because I told the truth. And with that I ended where it all began. Not with revenge, but with redemption. Time moved on, but my life no longer felt like something I was surviving. It felt like something I was writing. I became a published author. My memoir, From the Maid's Room to the Head Table, became a national bestseller. Not because of fame or scandal, but because truth resonates louder than fiction ever could. I traveled, gave TED Talks, met world leaders, and sat on panels beside people whose names used to intimidate me. But no matter how far I went, I never forgot where I came from. I still made my own tea. I still looked janitors in the eye and said thank you. I still called my mother every night. I was no longer the girl who looked in the mirror and saw only survival. I saw legacy. Every year on the anniversary of that unforgettable night, the night Madeline Devereaux tried to humiliate me, we held a Rising Voices ball. This year it was held in that same ballroom. I walked in with my head high, wearing a gown sewn by women from the Rising Voices program. But this time I didn't walk alone. Hundreds of women walked with me, maids, migrants, survivors, mothers, daughters, all dressed in confidence and courage. And when I stepped into the room, the guests stood up. and started clapping. Not for a billionaire. Not for a scandal. But for a maid who changed the story. For every girl who ever felt small. And for the truth. Dignity cannot be given. It must be claimed. And once you do, no one can ever take it away.